The Curse of the Gray Wolf. My great-grandfather came from a small Rhode Island town, a town that has a dark chapter in its past, and a story that has been passed from generation to generation in my family. Now it is up to me to pass on this tale. It started one autumn morning in a small farming community in northern Rhode Island. There was a nip in the air, and old Zachary Johnson could feel winter's chill move through the valley and harden his bones. He was the only dairy farmer in the village, and he was making his daily delivery rounds from store to store and house to house. It was a quiet morning, calm and peaceful, no delays in his deliveries, until he reached the outskirts of the village, where he came upon Ben Jacob's farm. One of the new sheep farmers had just moved into the valley. At first, there was nothing wrong. Zachary fetched the daily ration of milk from the wagon, opened the front gate, walked to the front door and knocked twice. No answer. "Good morning, Jacob's family," Zachary yelled. Still no response. Zachary was puzzled. This is a working farm, he thought, and it's morning. Where is everybody? So he walked around to the back of the house to see if Ben and his boys were out tending to their sheep, or if Mrs. Jacobs was in the back tending to her chores, and she just couldn't hear him. But when Zachary turned the corner, he discovered a sight that would stick with him for the rest of his life. It was Mrs. Jacobs he happened upon first, lying dead in the back porch doorway. Her throat had been ripped open. Blood was strewn all across the back porch. Zachary's boots stuck to the floorboards. My God, he thought. Who or what could have done this? Zachary looked to his right, towards the field where the sheep grazed. He saw a child's body by the fence line. As he rushed towards the body, he saw it was Danny, the Jacobs' youngest son. Same injuries as his mother, not a drop of blood in him. Couldn't be. Zachary climbed over the wooden fence to search for Ben and his oldest son, Billy. When he got to the top of the little grassy knoll, he saw them. Ben, Billy, and all their sheep scattered across the field, all dead from the same injuries. Their throats had been ripped out, drained of blood, the sheep included. Zachary was terrified. He tried to compose himself as best as he could and ran to his wagon. He got in and rode as quickly and as hard as he could into town and got the sheriff. Zachary told him everything he saw, and they rode back to the farm to investigate. The sheriff had never seen such carnage. Nothing like this had ever befelled this sleepy little town. He investigated the body of Mrs. Jacobs first. As he lifted her chin up and saw the gaping wound, he realized he had seen this kind of injury before. In an animal bite, he thought. The sheriff looked around the body to see if he could notice anything else, and just off the porch, he looked at the ground and saw a perfectly preserved paw print in the mud, a wolf print to be exact. It had rained the entire night before, so there was a clear muddy track of paw prints from body to body, from the back porch to the youngest boy by the fence, then to Ben and Billy and the sheep in the field. "Wolves!" the sheriff shouted. Zachary, who was knelt by the side of the house, feeling nauseous, looked up and said, "What was that, Sheriff?" "Wolves!" the sheriff shouted again. "This family was killed by wolves. I can't believe I didn't notice that before," Zachary said in disbelief. "That's all right, Zach. You were probably too much in a panic to notice paw prints," the sheriff said reassuredly. Zachary nodded and said, "But we've never had any wolf attacks around here before." "That's true. But we also haven't had farms out this far into the valley either, until recently," the sheriff noted. The Jacob family has been here, what, a year? Asked the sheriff. Yes, that seems about right, Zachary replied. And the Benjamin family next door, about a little less than that, correct? The sheriff asked again. Zachary nodded in agreement. The point is, Zachary, the further we impede into their land, the greater risk there is for this type of thing to happen, said the sheriff. The two men finished their conversation, then got into Zachary's wagon and headed back into town to fetch the undertaker. The bodies of the Jacobs family were retrieved, and a meeting of the town elders was taking place. Their decision was to hunt down and kill any wolf in the valley. The elders wanted to keep expanding the village and couldn't afford any more families to be massacred. They hired 4 of the best hunters from town and in the region and offered them a reward for every dead wolf they brought back. It took 2 years for the hunters to complete their task, and they made quite a profit in doing it. There were no wolves left in the valley by the time they were finished. In the winter of the next year, strange deaths started to occur across the land. Every farm across the valley had lost at least one animal. A cow, a chicken, sheep, even the farmers' dogs weren't safe. The strange thing about these deaths was there were no puncture wounds, no bites or lacerations, but the bodies were completely drained of blood, and a single pair of wolf prints were found by the bodies in the freshly fallen snow. So the hunters were called upon yet again. They met that night in the tavern to discuss a plan. There was Jonathan Benjamin, the owner of the farm next to the Jacobs family, his brother Samuel Benjamin. There was Walter Birch, an old fur trapper who lived in a cabin up the hills. And finally, there was Bill Toombs, who ran the general store. The plan they came up with was to meet at Walter's cabin in the morning and go from there. They said goodnight and agreed to meet in the morning. Bill met Jonathan and Samuel at their house and rode up to Walter's cabin. It was a cold and snowy day. The hollow wind echoed through the air. A blizzard was approaching. The men hurried to the cabin, and as they got closer, they could make out 2 objects laying on the ground near the entrance to the cabin. When they reached the cabin, they saw the 2 objects. It was Walter and his dog Buckshot, both lying in a pool of blood, completely drained, no wounds, no marks of any kind. The men were terrified. They rode out in great haste, back into town, telling whoever would listen what had happened. The town was in a panic. Rumors started to spread that the town was cursed for what they had done to the wolves. The elders tried to set the town at ease, and it worked. But for how long? The townspeople went about their daily lives for now. 2 days later, though, fear struck again when Bill Toombs was found dead in the back of his general store, sitting upright in his chair with a blanket up to his chin next to the fireside. He had died the same mysterious way as the others, drained of blood with no visible wounds. Except the strange thing about his death was all the doors were locked and the windows shut, and his shotgun propped up next to his chair. Also, there was a trail of snowy wolf prints that led from the front door to the body to the window, then tracks outside in the snow that led off into the forest. Well, needless to say, the Benjamin brothers were spooked. They were the last of the hunters left alive. They believed a ghost wolf was after them for all the killing they had done these past 2 years, and the townspeople were starting to believe it too, especially anyone who witnessed Bill's death in the general store. The Benjamin brothers continued to live in fear, always armed, always paranoid. But as week after week passed, and nothing happened. The fear started to dissipate in the village, and Christmas was fast approaching. The rumors and fear died down, and the townspeople were getting into the festive spirit. Then, on the morning of Christmas Eve, the dairy farmer, Zachary, was making his last deliveries before Christmas. His last stop was the Benjamin farm. The sky started to get dark. It looked like rain, so Zachary hurried off his wagon, grabbed the 2 pails of milk, and hurried to the front door. He could see the glow through the windows from the fireplace. He knocked on the door. No one answered. He knocked again. Still nothing. "Jonathan! Samuel! You home?" Zachary said. Still no answer. He moved to the right of the door to peek through the window. He could see 2 people sitting on the ground in front of the fireplace, next to the Christmas tree, holding each other. Zachary tried the door handle. He turned it, and it opened. Unlocked, he thought, as he opened the door. As he approached the 2 bodies, he could tell something wasn't right. They were stiff as a board, holding each other, and it was so cold in the room. But how, he thought? The fireplace seems like it was just lit. The fire was raging. He looked down at his feet, and there sat Jonathan and Samuel, holding each other. Complete fear gripped their faces. They looked frozen in pain. Blood was all around them, on the floors, walls, even on the Christmas tree. A rifle was in each of their laps. Neither had fired a shot, and a trail of bloody paw prints surrounded the entire room and out the back door into the snow. People would say they could hear a lone wolf howl late at night when the moon was full. After the last of the hunters had died, some say they even saw it. Gray fur with pale blue eyes. Either way, not too long after the final deaths, the wolf was never seen or heard from again, and the man who passed this story down through the generations in my family was Zachary, the dairy farmer. A story that no one in my family will ever forget. The demon's name is Dilly-Dally. My grandma was a strange lady. Everyone was afraid of her ways. My mom seemed uneasy about letting me visit my grandma, but we didn't have any other family. And Grandma could be persuasive. Grandma always ultimately got what she wanted. Grandma would make me visit and listen to her stories about who was cheating on who, stuff like that. She was the neighborhood gossip and tattletale. She broken up 2 married couples. She made everything her business. Then, Grandma would start telling me what a useless and disappointing girl my mama had always been. I'd be expected to sit through this and say, uh-huh, and nod at the right times to show that I was paying attention. If my eyes looked disinterested, even for the merest moment, Grandma would start again, from the very beginning, without skipping a beat. She would do this over and over, if need be. My visits to Grandma would then end with her telling me all about her possessions, which she kept in her magic handbag. They had strange names, like Ignorant and Spiteful, and were once little girls just like me, until Grandma had used her powers to turn them into something akin to demonic familiars, who she treated so cruelly that they would beg her for death every time she opened her handbag clasp to reach for her reading glasses. My mama would sometimes drive me home from my grandma's house while trying not to cry. In hindsight, I don't blame my mama for making me visit my grandma. My mama was a good woman. My mama was afraid, and people who are afraid can be controlled. It doesn't make them bad, just weak. Once, though, my mama was a few minutes late, picking me up from Grandma's house. My mama seemed to be cracking up. She was spluttering and sobbing and begging for forgiveness. My grandma simply spoke the words, "The demon's name is Dilly-Dally," and my mama's body dropped dead to the floor. The doctor said it was a heart attack. The doctor seemed afraid when he spoke my family's name and would look me in the face. Perhaps he'd met my grandma, I thought. It was all arranged rather hastily that I was to move in with Grandma. I was driven to my grandma's home by a social worker who wouldn't even walk me inside. I knocked at my grandma's door in the dainty way which Grandma liked, and then I suddenly entered before being invited. My grandma seemed to appear as if by magic, her handbag open just enough for a worm to slither inside. She simply spoke the words, "The demon's name is impatience." But she was too late. I spoke slightly before her and slightly over her with, "The demon's name is judgmental." What was weirdest was the way that Grandma died with a smile on her face, so satisfied. I remember her once saying, in a unique moment of kindness, "My magic handbag will be yours one day." UberEATS driver, possibly using multiple accounts, tried to break into my home upon arriving. Long-time lurker, first-time poster. All names in this story have been changed for privacy. For some context, I live in a major city and currently don't do a lot of driving due to ongoing issues with my car. Plus the pandemic has made me turn to more delivery apps in general. So the other day, around 1 p.m., I decided to order some lunch after doing a lot of cleaning. I placed the UberEATS order and found something to watch while I waited for the food. Within a few minutes, a driver accepted the order, and I noticed right away that the driver, Anthony, was on a bike, didn't have a profile picture or any deliveries on record. At first, I wasn't alarmed at all. I was almost amused, like, "Oh wow, guess I'm this person's first ever customer." But then, a full 30 minutes passes with no driver movement on the app, and at this point, I think maybe something is glitching, or the driver is stuck. I contact support via the chat option, and they ended up assigning a new driver because they couldn't reach the first one. Odd, but whatever. Now is when it starts getting a little weirder. The new driver assigned is in the exact same spot as the original driver was. They are also on a bike, also have no profile picture, and have no prior deliveries as well. And the driver's name was Lori. I let another 20 minutes pass with no driver movement before I message them myself and say, "Hi there. Are there any issues with the order?" The app shows that the driver saw the message, but no response. All this time I'm checking to see if UberEATS is maybe experiencing issues, none that I could find. And at this point, while I'm definitely weirded out, I'm mostly just hungry. So I contact support again to request some assistance. They reassign the driver again and apologize for the inconvenience. Same deal. They also tried to contact the driver with no response. Finally, the third driver assigned is the exact same scenario. Same spot, on a bike, no profile picture, no prior deliveries. Only this time, the name is Robert. And before I can react and go about canceling the order at this point, because I'm tired of dealing with this, he suddenly has my food and immediately messages me the following: "Hello, have your food. What's your phone number?" And I respond right away with, "I'm not super comfortable giving my phone number out when you can just message me here." And he responded again with, "What's your number? Be there in 10. How old are you?" And at this point, the alarm bells are going off, and I contact support immediately to have the order canceled and get further assistance. I get contacted to Uber's safety team, who informs me that the order has been canceled, I'll be refunded, and started taking down the details of the strange interactions. As I'm giving the woman on the phone the info she needs, I'm starting to calm down, thinking this was just some creep or something. And that's when I hear a man's voice at the front door. Miss Metal Gear 42069, I have your food. And I can't even describe the chill that went down my spine because of the way he said it. Making things even worse, the Uber safety woman on the phone with me heard him as well and goes, "Is that him? We canceled the order." I poked my head around the door. Main heavy door was open. Metal screen door was closed, locked, but allowed us to see each other, to get a look at him. And when he saw me on the phone, he went from smiling to looking furious. He suddenly got right up against the door and kept asking who I was on the phone with. And at this point, I've started asking him to please leave because he's making me uncomfortable. And he's getting more and more angry. And at this point, starts pounding on my door and grabbing the doorknob while shouting to be let in. The woman on the phone is asking if I'm okay. The man is still shouting. So basically, I'm in full meltdown mode at this point and hurriedly close the heavy door to lock it. The man is becoming borderline belligerent as he kicks my door, and the woman tells me to call the police. He ended up walking away from my house about a minute after that and back up to the sidewalk, and for a moment I thought he fucked off, so I finished my conversation with the Uber safety woman so she could submit the report. When she submitted it, I called the police and told them what happened. They weren't incredibly helpful at first, since he didn't actually break in or put his hands on me, and they told me if he came back to call again and they would send an officer out. I did end up having to call them again and give a full report, plus description of the man, since he didn't end up leaving right away. He stayed in the neighborhood for almost 20 minutes. According to one of my neighbors, after she heard the yelling, she saw the man I described walk back up from my house to the sidewalk and hop into a truck with another man in the passenger seat. And they apparently just sat there, staring at people walking by and being incredibly sketchy. And that's when she walked back towards my house and asked me what happened. Luckily, she was able to give myself and the cop a description of the vehicle and the other man as well. So basically, this was a very bizarre and uncomfortable experience, and I wanted to share it to maybe see if anyone has ever experienced anything like this, because honestly, I'm still pretty shaken up and will be avoiding delivery apps for quite a while. So, strange UberEATS driver who asked me for personal info and then proceeded to try and break in. Please, let's not meet again. Strange man in the Gettysburg woods. For those of you who don't know, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania was the site of the bloodiest battle of the American Civil War. An estimated 50,000 lives in total were lost, and over 10,000 of them have never been found to this day. Thousands are buried in the sprawling farmlands and forests and unmarked graves, and no remains have been discovered since 1997. This story takes place on July 3rd, 2022, the final day of the battle, at one of the more unknown paranormal hotspots in town, known by locals as Suicide Bridge. Many people are afraid to even set foot near it because its tragic history makes the energy there so unpredictable. It was initially constructed in 1886, and eventually the road was blocked off in 1998, so the only way to access today is by bike or a short walk on foot. My friend and I arrived around 8 that evening and parked our car at the more distant entrance and began the walk down the narrow paved road, surrounded by trees on both sides. As we got closer, we saw an investigation team on the bridge and chose not to bother them, so we turned around to walk back to the car, with plans of coming back later. As we walked back, my friend and I heard twigs crackling loudly in the woods next to us. He began to get paranoid and told me he thinks someone is there, but I brushed it off as a deer or some other wildlife just passing through. As we neared the car, my friend walked ahead of me and stopped in his tracks. "Caroline, someone is in there." I cautiously walked up next to him, and I looked over through the break in the trees. Not 15 feet off the road, there was a figure there, facing right towards us, not moving or speaking, just standing there. All I saw was a big white beard and white hair, but even in the daylight, the man's face was completely blank. I couldn't make out a single feature. I stood paralyzed with fear for a moment, and then a sense of impending doom washed over me. Something was extremely wrong. My legs started running before my brain told them to, and I began sprinting full speed for the car, while my friend trailed right behind me. It was the first time I had ever been in true terror. I fumbled with my keys to unlock the car and peeled out before my friend had even fully closed his door. While still processing what we had experienced, we decided to drive around to the other entrance, which is right off the main road, to talk to the people on the bridge. As we walked up, we heard their equipment going crazy, and as soon as our feet touched the wood, it stopped. They were very kind, and when we told them what we had seen, they all looked at each other in shock. They told us they were there a few days prior, and they saw the same blank-faced man walk off the road and down the bank to the creek below, before disappearing under the bridge. I was too scared to take a picture or a video, but I know now what we saw was not just some strange guy wandering the forest. Does anyone know of any legends or stories attached to the bridge involving this apparition? Was it a spirit or something much more sinister? I may never know, but I will never forget the fear and dread I felt at Suicide Bridge. My house was haunted in 2019. Oh my, I have had a lot of crazy experiences. My parents grew up in the Philippines, and my dad says we've had lots of witch doctors in our family. Long story short, the third eye has been passed down through our family for generations, and he has lots of crazy stories about things he's experienced and seen. But since he and my mom moved to Australia, he thinks he's either lost his third eye or there's just nothing here. But turns out I inherited it when I was born here. So at the start of 2019, I had a casual job in a cafe, and I come home in the middle of the day. My bedroom is at the very back of the house, so I walk through the whole house, and no one is home. So I let my dog in, and we head over to my room, and I decide to do some cleaning. We don't have round doorknobs that twist in my house. Our doors have those horizontal handles that you grab and push down. I was going to take out a bag of rubbish, and as I reach for the handle, it violently starts moving, like something had grabbed the other side of it and started pushing on it. I immediately launched forward and slammed the door shut and locked it. It was such a strong, violent presence that my first thought was someone is in the house trying to rob me. I stood still trying to listen if I could hear any movement, but there's nothing. My dog is a smart dog, too. If there were intruders in the house, he would have been barking and jumping at the door, but he was all fine and dandy. I messaged my family chat, asking if anyone is home, but it was at the middle of the day, and they all said they were at work. A few nights later, I wake up to the sound of my dog aggressively growling. My dog is a little Jack Russell Cross Poodle, and he's very friendly. Docile boy. I have never heard him, or any domestic animal for that fact, growl so deep in his belly. This dude was proper mad. His stance was wide, his head was low, tail tucked between his legs, and his eyes were fixed to the corner of my room, and he was so still, and he was so angry. I have never seen him like this before. At first I was scared, but then I got mad, and I looked to where my dog was looking, as if I knew where exactly this entity was, and I pointed my finger and said, "You can try to haunt me, but you leave my fucking dog alone." I was so mad. I feel the energy shift in the room, and my dog's eyes start following something across the room to the other side of my bed, and I couldn't see it, but somehow I knew I was looking right at it, and it just felt like a standoff, and whatever it was, left for the night. I decided to tell my family what's been happening at dinner one night, and my mom was pale. Her eyes widened and her jaw dropped, and I knew it was happening to her too. My mom is super skeptical about spirits and ghosts. She always has a logical explanation for everything, but even she opened up about things that have been happening to her during the same time. This carried on for a bit, but I finally decided to sage the house and ask whatever it was to leave. I don't care if people believe me or not, but I know what I saw, and it was fucking crazy. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel. Your generosity means the world to me. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness or Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank you all for your support, your kindness, and your encouragement. I appreciate it so very much. Until next time.